I'm Peter Yu. My normal job is CEO of Yawuru. We are the native title holders from Broome in Western Australia in the Kimberley area.
And you've just given a breakfast presentation for Reconciliation Week in Nipaluna, Hobart. What was the main message out of that for the new federal government around the Uluru Statement?
Well, I think I'm looking at the experience of the First Nation peoples in Tasmania and the nature of their resilience against the great atrocity historically, in terms of the attempt to physically and politically erase the nature of their presence here, and the fact that they've survived, and the fact that they're a very strong community and now growing and developing and engaged, at the political level. I think clearly the results of the election last week, federally, the message is we can't rely on any particular government. It's a national responsibility to take a bipartisan approach in re-establishing the kind of foundations in nation building in this country, where the Uluru Statement is a very conservative approach to it, but clearly in re-establishing that, we really do re-establish the relationship before we really need to look at the foundational issues associated with the nature of the constitutional reform matters that have been discussed and have been reported on, but now we need to do something about that.
And you put out a strong call for historical truth-telling and justice as the foundation for moving forward.
Well, I don't think reconciliation will be successful, or we as a nation owning our true selves, if there isn't the reconciling of that history at a very personal and a very local community level. I think it's incumbent upon us, our families, our relatives, our colleagues, in our workplace, in the broader community, where we have to own the truth of what has happened, and by telling those stories, I think is central and core to the whole healing process.
So, you, as you mentioned, you put out a call for this to be beyond politics, beyond political parties, that all sides, aspects of Australia must come together around this. Do you have a message for the health sector, that is Croaky's readers and followers? How can the health sector engage with moving progress on the Uluru Statement forward?
Well, I think the lack of return on investment in the improvement of health, and the lack of closing the gap that we've now heard for quite a number of years in the annual report by the Prime Minister in Parliament, clearly indicates that something is dramatically wrong in the way that the relationship is structured. I would suggest that every Aboriginal health service, or for that matter any community, would say that the nature of understanding what we would call our mawulian, which is fundamentally the sense of our well-being, our physical, mental, social well-being, and how that interfaces with our relationships with people on a daily basis, is so critical to growing the confidence and dealing with issues of intergenerational trauma. So the reconnection and the reassertion of the cultural and customary obligations that communities have to each other, and that kind of structure that fits around the protocol of that relationship, is something pretty fundamental. It goes to the heart of good lian or mawulian, in the way that people can grow confidence and deal with the challenges that they face at a head level. Now, because I think one of the critical factors is, of course, the systemic nature of the delivery of the programs that are there. There's an enormous amount of money that goes to health, but to get a greater return and a greater efficiency in the way that people are dealt with, so that we can deal with the physical and mental ailments of individuals in our community as a whole, is something that Aboriginal people need to own.
If you could give one piece of advice to the new old Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, what would that be?
Well, I think he has established through COAG the council, which is looking at closing the gap matters, but I think that's only one part of the restructuring and reforming the relationship. I would say that he has to be able to ensure that there is a growing level to grow the level of confidence in the Aboriginal community, that he's genuine about reform, and to be able to set up the structure so that it is Aboriginal people who are starting to take ownership of making those decisions in relation to future policy a development, but also I would think that if he wants to see those improvements, and I think people do want to see improvements, but I think the way we go about it is lacks the nature of the proper relationship that isn't in place at the moment.
And what does it mean to you to now have Ken Wyatt, the first Aboriginal person as Indigenous Affairs Minister?
Well, I think Ken should be congratulated. I think that obviously it's a historical moment for us as Aboriginal people, but also for us as a nation. Certainly Ken will be challenged, and he probably knows that better than anybody else. But I think Ken's a very decent man who's genuinely committed to wanting to provide a change, fill the gap, to be able to address the critical issues that we all face today. He's a man of integrity, so I think, notwithstanding, we have to steer away from the politic. We have to rise above the politic. We have to be able to work with Ken so that we can start to assist him in doing his job as best as he possibly can.
Thank you. And just one final question. You mentioned you encourage the audience to make sure to see the documentary coming out with Adam Goodes. You mentioned the pervasiveness of racism in Australian society today. What can the health sector do about that? I mean, what would you urge Croaky readers and followers to do?
Well, I think the nature of the continuing marginalisation and disadvantage and the health issues we face is embedded in the nature of the racist beginning of the country and the continual permeation of that. It's a core. If someone is being diminished, if someone is being vilified and demeaned and is not able to understand what other opportunities are there or how that confidence should allow them to independently go about their lives with dignity, it's fundamental to good mental health and obviously the physical health of people. But I mean, the unacceptable levels of continuing youth suicide, the whole question of the levels of incarceration, recidivism levels, we're not blind to this. I mean, this is the reality of every day of people's lives. And what we need to do is to ensure that this is a question of not making people feel guilty about what's happened, what's going on. I think we have to develop a level of consciousness that understands what is the nature of our ethical and moral soul, and how can we work, in better collaboration, so that we deal with these very fundamental human conditions that are not normal for Aboriginal people to be in.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yu. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, I think being here today at the Reconciliation Breakfast in Tasmania this week, I think it's tremendous to see the work that Reconciliation Tasmania are actually doing. It's heartening to know that there is a growing interest and to participate and to make a commitment in relation to reconciliation. And sometimes you can get cynical about it, but if you're not there, you're not doing it, then you're not part of the game.